Oregon has their new running backs coach, and boy, it looks like a great hire. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. So Rashad Samples is Oregon's new running backs coach to replace Carlos Locklyn. This looks like a really good move. My man Richie Bradshaw is here of Locked On Sun Devils, who, let's just say, was not thrilled to hear of this move because Samples' ability to be a high-level assistant coach on staff and perhaps one day head coach, as Kenny Dillingham has described him on multiple occasions, I believe, it's well established at this point. So, Richie, why is this such a great hire for Oregon?
Well, where you can start is from a coaching aspect. And this is a guy who is very young. He's 29 years old. He understands the offense really, really well. He was a wide receivers coach at Arizona State. He's coming to be a running backs coach for Oregon / the assistant head coach. But this is a guy who really understands today's offenses and how to spread guys out and how to incorporate what we used to call the pro style offense and everything. He's someone who is just so in tune with the way that football is played these days. But bigger than anything else, bigger than the coaching aspect, bigger than the culture building aspect, because he is a really good fit for what Dan Lanning wants in his staff and his players in everything that he built. The biggest aspect here is the recruiting. Rashad Samples is a great recruiter. And if there's one place that he has specialized, it's the state of Texas. And Spencer, you know as well as I do, if there's a place you want to recruit from, it's Texas.
Texas, California, Florida. Those are your top three states every year.
Yep. The 3 stars in Texas are 4 stars in 48 other states. They are as good as it's going to get. And it created, with him and with the other positional coach at ASU, Brian Carrington, what we called the hashtag Texas to Tempe movement. Tempe, of course, being where Arizona State University is located. But that was a little pipeline that they had started to develop, was bringing those Texas kids to Arizona State. Well, now Oregon is going to be able to start creating that pipeline for themselves. And Oregon has done a good job recruiting all over the place. They recruit Arizona like it's nobody's business. Thanks for that. But they are bringing a great aspect here from a recruiting standpoint with Rashad Samples. And he's a young guy, and he's somebody that these kids that are 17, 18, 19 years old can relate to a little bit more compared to coaches that are in their 40s or 50s or 60s. He understands what it means to get these kids acclimated to the college scene and speak to them in a language that they understand. So it's a really good hire from the coaching aspect, but I would tell you it's an even better hire from a recruiting aspect.
Yeah, and Samples has been a position coach in the NFL, most recently with the Los Angeles Rams. Then he was at Arizona State. And, you know, he seems to be an ambitious guy. That's the way Kenny Dillingham has painted him, of course. And I think that Dan Lanning has kind of stuck with the theme of his hires, you know, some of his best hires on staff. He's got a lot of good ones on both sides of the ball, but bringing in guys that are not, you know, looking for a fresh start after it not working out elsewhere, but he's looking for someone going from maybe a smaller school or a program that's not quite as prominent as Oregon. Again, sorry, Richie, but, you know, taking coaches from that level, elevating them at Oregon, giving them a platform to really shine and really showcase, you know, what their full potential is. You look at Kenny Dillingham, for instance, had certainly been at some, you know, really notable stops like Auburn. Previously, he was at Florida State with Mike Norvell for a year, and then he comes, and the first time he's a play caller is with Oregon. He's now Arizona State's head coach. And I think I speak for a lot of Oregon fans when I say we all root for Kenny Dillingham. We all liked Kenny Dillingham quite a bit. And I think he, genuinely loves Arizona State. And Oregon fans at the moment really love that Rashad Samples is making his way to Eugene. So one thing that I have seen a lot amongst Oregon fans all over the place, people send me messages of this sort of stuff, just kind of a common, discourse and whatnot of what's getting shared out there in the Oregon community is this guy is, a big upgrade over Carlos Locklyn, who I thought was very good. And I thought we all agreed was very good. But then when a guy leaves, of course, he becomes, just so much worse. And that guy wasn't, any good anyway and such. But it sounds like Samples does have the recruiting chops that I'm not saying Locklyn didn't have. I think that Locklyn's recruiting results were good. I think his strength was the on-field coaching, and where Samples could, we have to wait to actually, see what the results are over the next couple of years, where Samples could be better than Locklyn overall is if he is able to develop the same way that Locklyn did, which is what Carlos Locklyn has been very good at over the course of his career and will be again at Ohio State. But Samples is working with, more highly touted recruits. I think that's where his full potential can kind of get unlocked at Oregon.
Yes. Everything that you're saying rings true. And I love the point you made about Dan Lanning wanting these young, ambitious guys, right? It's not like Samples has fallen out of favor at Arizona State. In fact, it's the exact opposite. This is a guy that Arizona State fans were kind of hoping would stay at the program long enough that he could eventually become a larger part and piece of the puzzle with the coaching staff. And there were some hopes that he could maybe be the offensive coordinator one day, but of course they made a different offensive coordinator hire during the offseason. I couldn't tell you if he interviewed or not, but there's an opportunity that's bigger than what was at Arizona State. And Rashad Samples, who again is a young guy and is looking to build a name for himself, sees a huge, great opportunity at Oregon and hops on it. And it's one of those jobs where I was talking with a couple of people that are kind of in the loop with everything. And they were like, yeah, well, when you get offered those kind of opportunities, you can't pass it up. And it's Oregon. You can't really pass up Oregon. You wouldn't call them blue blood from a historical standpoint, but for the last 20, 30 years, Oregon has been a very, very, very good football program. So when they come calling, more often than not, you're picking up the phone, you're answering, and you're taking them up on their offer. Really good situation. Couldn't tell you about your previous running backs coach, but I really think that this is more of an impact from the assistant head coaching portion of the hire here compared to the running backs coach, because he is versatile enough to work with every unit on offense. He's worked with running backs previously. He's worked with receivers. This is just someone who, again, like I said, really understands how the offense functions in today's football landscape. So to me, this hire was a lot more focused on getting him that promotion to get him to the next step, because I don't know if he would have done a lateral move to another program, but there was something here that was absolutely going to help him get to the next stage of his career.
Well, I think he sees Oregon as an opportunity to elevate his profile, as you said, and the track record, not just with Oregon, but with Dan Lanning specifically, is very good along those lines. So even if he's only with Oregon for a year or two, the next job that he takes is probably going to be a sizable one, whether it's an offensive coordinator role at a Power 4 school, or, Kenny Dillingham has said he wants to be or could be a head coach one day. Maybe he takes that at, a Group of 5 or FCS school, or, wherever he, ends up finding an opportunity. You look at Dillingham at Arizona State. You look at Locklyn going off to, Ohio State. That's probably a job he took because he thinks, for various reasons, that Ohio State's an even better opportunity than Oregon. So I think that trajectory and the way that Lanning has talked publicly about coaches and the way that he wants to bring coaches in that can help them succeed, but also allow them to succeed in their careers as well. I think it's a really, really good fit, and I think that Oregon should be really, really happy that, this is the move after Locklyn, who I'm not going to just come on here and bash on, because I thought Carlos Locklyn was very good. I was bummed to lose him, but I am equally as excited about what Rashad Samples can do as Oregon's running back coach, as I was disappointed that Locklyn decided to go to Ohio State. Richie Bradshaw, Locked On Sun Devils. You can catch him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at RichieBrads36. That's Brads with a Z. Richie, thanks so much.
It's my pleasure to talk about ASU anytime, even when it's not the best news in the world. But yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I could see the pain on your face when we began this segment talking about Samples going, but that's the caliber of hire that Oregon has made here. With Oregon's receiving corps, Samples is coming in to help coach one of the best units in the entire country. Where does Gary Bryant Jr. fit into that offense? Yeah, we'll talk about that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Ducks is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire, gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring's easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and you should too. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. By all accounts, coming over from USC last year, Gary Bryant Jr. was a good wideout for the Ducks. 30 catches, 442 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think my favorite Gary Bryant Jr. play so far in his Oregon career was that touchdown against Arizona State where he catches the ball out wide, spins away from 2 guys who kind of crash into each other, takes off for like a 75-yard touchdown. It helped get Bo Nix the nickname the Yak Merchant, of course, but that was just a heck of a football play. I wonder about Gary Bryant Jr.'s role coming into this season. So a question came in from the subtext community, which you can join, link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show, about whether Gary Bryant Jr. will stick around with the Ducks this season. I suspect that he will. I don't expect Bryant to be a guy that hits the transfer portal when it opens on April 15th. And as we go through that spring portal window and the spring game on April 27th, I'm sure there will be guys that jump into the portal. That's kind of the way of college football nowadays. But I think that for Bryant, he's got an established role, and he just has to hold on to it. I don't think he's chasing anybody else on this receiving corps. Evan Stewart's going to be the number 1 wide receiver, and Tez Johnson will be the number 2 at the slot, and Trayshawn Holden's probably your primary guy on the outside, and Gary Bryant Jr. can play anywhere. He can play inside, he can play outside, and I think he's the next guy in that rotation. That's what he was a season ago. I expect him to be in a similar capacity this year. I think that his receiving role is the most open of Oregon's top wideouts. Now, you can make the case for Trayshawn Holden. I'm really high on Holden, and I like Gary Bryant Jr. a lot, but this is just where Oregon's receiving corps is at. Like, truly, Trayshawn Holden said the other day after practice, he was fielding questions, and, he said what a lot of players say is, we have the best wide receiver room in the country. With Oregon, that might actually be true. Like, you've got Evan Stewart, you have Tez Johnson, who just set the program record with regards to single season receptions and had a 1,000-yard season, while Troy Franklin was in the room. Like, those are your top 2 guys. Then you have Trayshawn Holden, who could be a number 1 on several teams in the Big Ten or Power 4 conferences writ large. I don't think he'd be necessarily the highest end number 1 guy, but he can be a number 1 receiver. He's got that sort of body type and explosiveness, and I think he really showcased that in the moments that he shined bright last year, and when he got an opportunity to catch the ball. When that's your number 3, now you're number 2. If Trayshawn Holden, right, if Evan Stewart never came in and Trayshawn Holden were your number 1 outside receiver and Tez Johnson were inside, I'd still feel good about Oregon's receiver room. Instead, if you come out in, base 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers, and your 3 wideouts, snap 1 for the offense with Dylan Gabriel behind center, and you've got Evan Stewart as your receiver on the outside on one end, and then you've got Trayshawn Holden on the other, and Tez Johnson in the slot, and Terrence Ferguson as your tight end. That's just that's just a wide array of weapons. But bringing this back to Gary Bryant Jr., because that's where the question was centered, I think he's got the most to lose in spring football amongst these wideouts, just because he's not a guy that is going to be a number one target. I don't think he could, have more upward mobility on the depth chart. I think he just kind of is where he's at now. If Tez Johnson were to go down with an injury, Gary Bryant would be your number one slot receiver. I think that is pretty clear. With the way they use Tez Johnson with some pop passes and screen passes and in the RPO game, I think Bryant fits that really, really well. But he's got Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper, who have been on campus for at least 1 year each. Now, Dickey wasn't fully healthy last season after getting injured his senior year of high school, and Kyler Casper was a 2023 recruit, but reclassified to 2022. Still a really talented guy, more of a big-bodied receiver who could play on the outside, but Jurion Dickey, he wants to play, and I think Oregon fans are well aware of just how talented he is and what he is capable of as a wide receiver. And when your fourth best wideout catches 30 balls for 440 yards and 4 touchdowns, that's when you've got, number one, a really good passing game, because Will Stein is a very good offensive coordinator. But number two, you've just got a real depth of talent. I think that Gary Bryant Jr., having stuck around to this point, is indicative that he wouldn't leave. Like if he were going to seek a larger role elsewhere, I think he would have done that already. Maybe he reconsiders depending on, how things shake out during spring practice and what the depth chart looks like and how Jurion Dickey looks. Because, Bryant was a very highly touted recruit coming out of high school as well. He was not on Jurion Dickey's level. And I think in the long run, Dickey's kind of a better version with a higher ceiling of Gary Bryant, but is he ready to contribute? That's a question, and that's something that's going to get answered over the course of spring practice that Junior Adams and Will Stein and now Rashad Samples will be evaluating for Oregon's receiver room. Because if Dickey starts to hit his full potential, and Stein talked at the beginning of spring practice about how last year he didn't really know the plays or where to go and everything like that. Like he wasn't a spring enrollee, he was a fall enrollee because he finished his high school's career on a more normal timeline. He then shows up and isn't fully healthy and isn't grasping the playbook entirely, but Stein said now he is, and sky's the limit for that guy. Well, okay. When the offensive coordinator is saying what we all think and, what appears just to be true with the way that, he was recruited coming out of high school, I think he's someone who at the very least will push Gary Bryant Jr. for snaps. Now, I think there's definitely room for both to be on the field, but how many balls will one guy catch if the other is in the mix, right? If they have to kind of split that fourth receiver position, is that something he's open to? I don't know. Or maybe Bryant is just able to lean on his experience and Will Stein's familiarity with him in the offense, and certainly he did a lot of good things at the wide receiver position last year. If he is able to just kind of hold on to that spot, then yeah, I would definitely think that he sticks around, because he is definitely talented enough to be a number 2 receiver on a Power 4 college football team. Absolutely. But he did not seek that option. And so, barring a change in spring football, I think that Bryant is probably the number 4 receiver, and Dickey is probably 5th, and Casper 6th, and those are your top wideouts. And, if you have an injury here or there, you adjust the depth chart accordingly. But I don't expect Gary Bryant to have a bigger role than he had last year. I think that within the structure of the passing offense, you're just going to have guys that will always get more targets. I think Dylan Gabriel is going to throw to Tez Johnson a lot. I mean, a lot. His leading receiver last year was Drake Stoops, who worked out of the slot almost entirely. And yes, Drake Stoops was the son of Oklahoma legendary coach Bob Stoops. And never forget, Bob Stoops against Mike Bellotti, Oklahoma, Oregon. What was it, 2006? With the onside kick? What a day. Okay, anyway, I'm sure that was a fun trip down memory lane for, Oregon fans, because Oregon won that game. So, heck of a call. All right. I think that Dylan Gabriel is going to look at Tez Johnson and say, this is familiar to me, because Drake Stoops is someone who he had a great rapport with a year ago, but Tez Johnson is better than Drake Stoops. I think he's better in the open field, and I think he's a better route runner, and I think they've got similar sort of body type and build, and, where they thrive with, their routes and everything like that, and the sorts of routes that he's going to run. I think Johnson could lead Oregon in receiving receptions. I'll say receptions. I think he could lead Oregon in receptions again. Will he lead Oregon in receiving yards? I don't know, because Evan Stewart's explosive and dynamic, but I think this receiving core is good. I think Gary Bryant can have a role, but I think of the top 4 wideouts that Oregon's got, 3 of whom are returning from last year, I think his spot is the most up for grabs compared to the other 3. But still, I'd expect that he is probably the starter there. But we'll see how that plays out over the course of spring football and kind of what happens in the spring game, which will have some really fascinating matchups. What are the most exciting matchups for Oregon in the spring game, which is less than 20 days away? How about that? That's coming up next. You've heard of a second segment sip, but have you heard of a third segment sip? Yeah, because it's happened before. So here is a couple of mailbag questions. Let's start with this one from Dr. Classic MD. Which player matchups, particularly receiver versus corner, offensive line versus defensive line, are you most excited to see at the spring game, and who do you think will win those matchups? So this will depend on how the teams get split up. What Oregon did last year, I think, was really great and the most fun for us to watch from afar, which was split up the teams kind of evenly and then rotate the quarterbacks, but kind of have, this be QB1's team, this be QB2's team, and then get QB3 some reps in there, and maybe we'll see QB4. I would love to see a little bit of Luke Moga in there, but I think that for Oregon going into that spring game, number one matchup I would like to see, I can't guarantee it'll happen, they could be on the same team, Evan Stewart against Jabbar Muhammad. That's wide receiver 1 against CB 1. And I think that those two guys are both NFL caliber dudes, and we've seen what they've put on display over the first couple of years of their college careers and the potential they've got. I think those two is get out the popcorn. And if I had to pick, who would I say is going to win that matchup? I'd lean Evan Stewart, just because advantage tends to lead towards the offense. Like perfect offense in football, it's like good pitching in baseball. Good pitching beats good hitting. And in football and basketball, good offense beats good defense. So I lean towards Evan Stewart there, but that's a matchup where if they're on the outside, I will be screaming at the television, throw it there. Throw it there, see what happens. Just give me a 1v1, fade to the corner, deep post, comeback, whatever. Just let me see what those two guys look like, because they're going to be playing at a really high level. In the trenches, I'd give you a lot of matchups. That'd be really fun, but I'll give you my top 2, for these particular categories here. I think that for the trenches, I want to see Mateo Uiagalelei against either of Oregon's tackles, but most notably Josh Conerly. So Conerly, by all accounts, had a really good season last year. I'm pretty sure he was Pac-12 honorable mention. Might have that wrong, but he had a good year, and he was really good in run blocking. He was solid, but can still improve in pass blocking. I saw a picture of Mateo flying around the other day from spring practice. He has bulked up. He looks huge, and he was already a big guy. When you're able to play as a true freshman, there's a reason, and it's that you're physically ready to step on the field and contribute. Mateo did that last year. Always remember him dog walking that Oregon State tackle into his brother for the sack in the Civil War. But I think that Conerly has got NFL potential with his size and athleticism, and he improved a lot from year 1 to year 2 when he had to take on a much bigger role. I expect him to improve again and be an all-conference caliber guy at that left tackle position. But him against Mateo, that could be Oregon's best pass rusher. Jordan Birch is Oregon's most experienced defensive lineman, and Jamari Caldwell's got great experience as well. But your best pass rushers tend to come off the edge, and Birch, is statistically, according to PFF, a little bit better against the run than he is against the pass. Like he still is able to generate quarterback pressures, but I think Mateo's pass rush ceiling is really high. And Oregon needs to have that sort of presence off the edge because Brandon Dorlus isn't there anymore. So Mateo against Conerly, that'd be my number one trenches matchup that I'd want to see. And then on the outside, Evan Stewart, Jabbar Muhammad. That is popcorn time. If those two, they should have just like 3 plays in a row where it's designed to match up Stewart and Muhammad and see who can win. See who can win the most of those 3 matchups. I think that'd be great. Great question though. Love that. Spring game, not far away. If you got questions about what to watch for, by all means, drop them in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. This question came from Bud via subtext. The House antitrust class action lawsuit against the NCAA, if successful, could result in over $4 billion in damages. How would that impact Oregon athletics, especially football? So for those of you who don't know what Bud is asking about here, there's a lawsuit against the NCAA. It's called House v. NCAA that is essentially looking at the legalization of paying players through NIL and saying you owe us money retroactively because you didn't let us make money. And it would be potentially to the tune of several $billion. My understanding is this does not impact Oregon in any way because the lawsuit is being brought against the NCAA, and I don't know that when the NCAA is the governing structure, if they'd have the legal authority to say, well, the universities have to go back and pay these players, because I think the universities could pretty easily say, no, we would have, but you wouldn't let us, and we were just abiding by your rules here. So I don't think Oregon will have anything come of that. It's an interesting case. If for those of you out there that are curious about what will happen with the NCAA and potential downfall and everything like that, that case is at the center of whether or not the NCAA could continue, because the NCAA's got a lot of money. Do they have $4 billion? Now that's I think more of a maximum amount for what they could owe if they're found to be liable or the lawsuit goes against them, which recent precedent in the court would tell you that it will, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'll let them figure that out. Does the NCAA have, a couple $1 billion to just continue to? I don't know. I don't know, but they're not in the best of places right now. Okay. Let's close on what was a good weekend for a couple of spring sports, baseball and softball. So softball beat number 9 Washington on Sunday in a 9-8 thriller. It's either Sunday or Saturday. All days are a social construct. I literally, when broadcasts are going on, I don't know what day of the week it is, literally ever. But softball had their first series win against UW since 2018. Not bad. Both Oregon softball and baseball, who both made super regionals last year, by the way, and I believe they were the only athletic department to have a team in both the softball and baseball super regionals. They're both ranked inside the top 25. So that was really nice, and wanted to shout out softball for beating the Huskies, who have a great softball program. But baseball won 2 of 3 against UCLA. So Mark Wasikowski's team is now 22-8 on the year, 8-4 in Pac-12 play, and they won the first game 8-4. They lost the second game in 10 innings on a walk-off bases loaded walk, 4-3, and then they won on Sunday 6-3. And look, he comes up a lot on the show because I know a lot of people are football fans more than baseball fans, but Bryce Betcher, I don't know. He was hitting leadoff in the most recent lineup, and I don't know if there's been a defensive center fielder that Oregon baseball has had in my lifetime. Now, it's a relatively newer program, and admittedly, I followed it more over the last couple of years since I started hosting the show, but he threw out a guy at third, and he just is making a play. The ball is in right center field, line past the shortstop, and he moves to his right, comes up firing, throws it on a line, tag applied, cuts a guy down, and probably ends up saving a run, because instead of first and third with no outs, I think it was runner on first with 1 out early in the game. But the thing I want to highlight here is something that Jared Mack talked about when he came on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about baseball because that's something that he covers. And, I keep up with it as best I can. If you want, the best follow for Oregon baseball on Twitter is Jared Mack. 100%. He's covering it in person and does a really, really good job. So Oregon's not lost a Pac-12 series yet, which is a really, really good place to be. But something that Jared talked about on the show is, the hitting's good, maybe a little bit, below where it was at a season ago, but the pitching feels like it is better. That like it is improved, more experienced, and they have done just a phenomenal job over the last several games. So they've given up fewer than 5 runs, as in 4 or less, in 7 of their last 8. And do I think that this Oregon baseball lineup is as good as last year? Not quite, but it's still above average and more than good. Now, it's kind of how I view the Oregon football offense last year with Dylan Gabriel instead of Bo Nix, right? It's still above average. One of the best you're going to find anywhere. Is it absolute killer like it was a season ago with Bo Nix at the helm? No, probably not. But still, more than good enough to take you where you want to go. The pitching has been the problem the last couple of years. And right now, this staff is in a really, really good groove. And we have seen more games where, Oregon is winning when the offense isn't clicking. They had a back-to-back game slate where they won 2-1 and 3-2. Okay, that didn't happen last year. That was not a thing. And the pitching staff right now, they're just getting quality. I think they got some really quality arms in the bullpen. You got Logan Mercado out there. Brock Moore has got phenomenal stuff. His name is escaping me, but the lefty transfer from Gonzaga who's got kind of a funky windup. He had the save in the game against Portland on Tuesday last week. Oregon went 3-1 overall in the week. So I think the pitching has been really, really solid. And the biggest key, I think, has been the starting pitching. They're not wearing down the bullpen. They're giving them quality innings, keeping them in it. And, sometimes, it's, 5 1/3 and 4 runs. But last year, it felt like when you had a bad day on the mound for an Oregon starter, it was you went 5 1/3 and gave up 7 or 8 runs, or you didn't even get to the 5th inning. And that just, wears on the bullpen. So, the starting pitching, Michael Friend had a great start the other day. R.J. Gordon has delivered some really quality starts. I think the pitching is looking really, really good. They take on Sacramento State in a 2-game series on Tuesday and Wednesday, but I really like where the pitching staff is at right now, and the offense is just always there. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.